Saturday Morning 101, where we dissect the essentials of Saturday morning. And this one was initially not on my list, Willow. I don't know why. I had kind of forgotten about it, even though I loved it as a kid. And this was one of the shows that got me up in the morning to watch. Um, but I'd kind of forgotten about it, but it popped up on all of our audience lists when I put out the call. Hey, what is an essential Saturday morning? Over and over and over, the call came out for Dungeons and Dragons.
Interesting.
And Willow, before we started doing the homework for the show, had you ever seen the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon? I know you've seen the movie.
I feel like I have. Like, the art does look familiar. I did watch a couple of the episodes, and it does kind of ring a bell, but I don't really recall it being one of my like the go-to cartoon that I would run to the TV for.
Well, let's see. Let me pull up the tail of the tape here, the bones, as it were, on Dungeons and Dragons. It was a show about the characters that you see on screen: Hank, Bobby, Eric, Diana, Presto, and what was the thief's name? That's going to drive me crazy, crazy. The redhead's name. What was her name? The unicorn was called Uni.
The redhead's name is Sheila, and which is odd because you think that a character with my real name would be a draw for me.
Well, yeah, Sheila. Now, Hank was the huntsman. Diana was the acrobat. Presto obviously was the wizard. Bobby, the little boy, was the barbarian. Sheila was the thief, and Eric was the guardian. And the wizard that brought them together would call them by those titles. But Sheila, he never called the thief. He always called her by her name. Now, the premise was this gang of kids, and I don't know that they were friends to begin with or not. They just ended up on this roller coaster ride together at the theme park. And they go into the tunnel, the Dungeons and Dragons roller coaster ride, because in the 80s, of course, a theme park would have a Dungeons and Dragons ride because the Dungeons and Dragons game was huge and it was a big part of pop culture, both positively and negatively. So they go through this tunnel, and it kind of like Land of the Lost. It plunged them down deep below to a land of swords and sorcery, where they met the little elvish wizard, and
which kind of looks oddly like Brian K. Morris.
Oh my gosh, it does. For those of you who don't know who Brian K. Morris is, he is a mutual friend of Willow and I, and it does look like him. If Brian K. Morris were playing Yoda, that's what it looks like. And the demon character in the background, I think he was called Tanger. Anyway, the whole show is about how these 6 kids adopt, and in the very first episode, they adopted this baby unicorn, Uni, but it's all about how they use their powers to fight the forces of evil and eventually find their way back home to Earth. Now, Willow, I sent us some 10 things you didn't know about Dungeons and Dragons, the cartoon show. And for those of you who just are tuning in, we're talking about the cartoon series from the 80s. And let's see, when was it? 82 to 80?
83 to 85, and which makes sense because I was like 2 when that cartoon came out.
I didn't even know this was a thing, you guys. I have never heard of this ever.
Well, Dee, did you watch the clip that I sent you?
No.
I knew you didn't. Um,
I mean, I'm just gonna be honest. I've had zero time. I hadn't even been able to do my work, much less this.
well, so in the first episode, you know, they meet the wizard. They get their magical weapons. Hank has a bow. Bobby has a club that he can. It's like this magic club that he can smash things with. Um, Sheila has a cloak of invisibility. Eric has this shield that can protect them from anything. It's like this invulnerable shield. Diana has this staff that is both a tool and a weapon, and it grants her incredible acrobatic abilities and martial arts skills. And Presto has a magic hat that he can pull things from and cast spells with, but he's not very good at it. And Eric, the guardian, the one with the shield, he's a coward, and he's like kind of like Shaggy. He wants to run away all the time. Bobby, the little kid with the mallet, with the club, he just like jumps into everything, feet
It is
first.
probably one of the reasons why their campaign fails almost every time.
Well, him and Presto, because Bobby is too ambitious, and Presto cannot. He's got trouble. He's got problems casting spells. Hank and Diana are the only two that seem to have a really level head, and Sheila does too. But Sheila's weapon is a cloak of invisibility. It's not really a weapon. It doesn't have a lot of functional use. Now, in the TV show, though, their goal is to go back home. But do you know, Willow, they never made it home.
No.
The show ended before the finale ever aired. It was put out by the creators later on, like in 2002, something like that. And it's in our trivia, but they never made it home until on screen this commercial. You guys may remember this came out like maybe 3 or 4 years ago. This car commercial, and it had the live action characters from the cartoon series. And at the end, the wizard grants them this car, and they drive back home.
Why does that girl look like Ivy?
We're just recasting Dungeons and Dragons with our friends.
Yeah,
Ivy.
I can see that. Yeah. Diana was my favorite, and Diana is the black girl in the fur bikini. Can you guess why she was my favorite?
Why she looks like Halle Berry? I don't know.
In a fur bikini. Halle Berry in a fur bikini. Hello. So after the popularity of the cartoon series, there was a 1990s movie starring Jeremy Irons. And Willow, I know that
parts
you've
of
seen
it
this
that
movie.
was good, and I mean,
It looks way low budget. This looks like an Amazon Prime original movie.
I feel like I remember this, and I feel like my mom wouldn't let me watch it. Was it violent or something?
So that's been a complaint that parents groups have had about Dungeons and Dragons, is that the cartoon they complained was too violent. But Dungeons and Dragons, the game,
considering all the other stuff that was out around that time.
Well, but this was violence with real stakes. These kids, every episode, were on the verge of death. They were facing life and death violence. It wasn't like the other kind of cartoon violence that, we see in superhero cartoons where, there's danger, but not really. They had people really wanting to kill them, and a big 7-headed dragon that was pursuing them. And Venger is his name, not Tanger. Venger, the demon lord, he wanted to kill them and collect all of their weapons. And I mean, he was a demon with big bat wings and fire. And I mean, he was a scary dude. And that was one of the things in our trivia this week, is that parents said it was too violent. The 80s saw an uproar in America from parent groups who found some children's television to be, quote unquote, too violent. And that's why the 20th episode, The Dragon's Graveyard, almost didn't make it to air. In the episode, the children finally fed up with the villain Venger's plans to keep them from returning home, because that's why they couldn't get home. Venger wanted to capture them, get their weapons, and so he was always blocking their way. They resolved to get rid of him. They're going to kill him with the help of the five-headed dragon Tiamat. And of course, he's the star of the games, many of the games. And the children's desire to kill Venger rattled cages, but was eventually allowed to air as they did not go through with the plan. I mean, that's pretty hardcore. When you got kids on a Saturday morning cartoon show wanting to kill the villain, that's why your mom thought it was too violent.
Makes sense. Well, I mean, I'm not talking about the cartoon. I'm talking about the actual movie. Like, because when the cartoon came out, I was a baby.
I know, but if the cartoon was too violent, can you imagine what parents thought about the movies?
No, that's fair. Yeah. Okay.
But again, there were other movies out much more violent. Bloodsport.
Well, yes, but how many of them? How many of those movies were based on a property that had been turned into a Saturday morning cartoon show for kids? Do you see where I'm going?
You know what I did watch though?
What was it? Like a couple years? Sorry, D. A couple of years after Dungeons and Dragons was released, Mortal Kombat came out.
Yeah, but Mortal Kombat wasn't a cartoon. It was never
a video game. But
it was a video game with a warning, with a parental guidance warning. But
didn't they redo that again a couple of years ago?
Yeah, they keep going to that well. But you saw the 90s movie, and there turns out there's been several more. So that's the original one. Then this one, the what is it? The Elemental Night. And then of course the current film in theaters right now, the Honor of Thieves. And do I have a screenshot from that? No, I don't. I thought I did. I thought I had one. Anyway, I had plans last night to go see the new movie, but Johnny doesn't have a car right now. And in Middle Tennessee, if you don't have a car, you're pretty much not getting anywhere. It's not like other cities where there's public transit.
I was just gonna say, like, it just throws me off when you say that. And it's like, where's the buses?
There are buses downtown Nashville, but there's no movie theater downtown Nashville. The closest movie theater to downtown Nashville is 7 miles away. Yeah. It's a very different lifestyle here than Winnipeg, Willow.
Clearly. Like, I mean, our public transit kind of sucks, but at the same time, at least we can go to the other ends of the city in order to get places.
Well, you can go from one end of the city to the next, but it stops at the city limits. And there are like anything that you want to do that's like not terribly expensive or fun, like the movie theaters or roller rinks or anything like that, is 7 to 10 to 20 miles outside of town.
Huh.
So you go to the city limits, you get off the bus, and then you go, okay, let's call an Uber and spend $40 to $60 to take an Uber 12 miles out of town. So anyway, it's a thing. So I did not go see the movie last night like I had planned. But some more trivia.
Oh, baby cat, meow. Hey there, dude.
So,
He's needy.
oh my gosh, this is why we need an outline. Okay. So this show, Willow, was created by Marvel Animation Studios. Um, and
That's why the art looks familiar.
yeah, it was, and Marvel did a lot of the TV cartoons from the 80s. G.I. Joe, Transformers, Gem. They did several others, but they also did Dungeons and Dragons. And it was written by Mark Evener, who was the creator of Garfield and Friends. And other writers included Steve Gerber, who created or was the co-creator of Marvel's Howard the Duck. Paul Dini was credited as a writer, and he was the co-creator of Batman's Harley Quinn and her introduction in Batman the Animated Series. So there were some heavy hitters of comics and animation working on Dungeons and Dragons. That's pretty awesome. And then do you have this trivia stuff up, Willow?
I do.
I'm looking at number 8. So what's that all about? Eric, the Cavalier, not the Defender, the Cavalier.
Eric was meant to be unlikable. Anyone who watched the show will tell you that Eric the Cavalier was no one's favorite character. Oftentimes whiny, stubborn, or content to tell the group that their plan was bad. It was a bad idea. However, what you may not know is that Eric was made this way for a reason. Kind of like Ross's character in Friends.
Yeah, parent groups at the time wanted kids to know that sticking with the group and working together was always the right thing to do. Therefore, the kids' plan that Eric oftentimes berated would always turn out to work, and Eric would always come across looking like the odd one out. Wow, are your pets talking to each other over the interwebs?
Apparently, well, Mittens is very needy. So I don't know. I don't know what Dee's dogs are up to.
My daughter's coming home, and I forgot to close the door and lock her out. So there's that. But my daughter has a very loud truck, and the dog hears it.
Oh.
That's funny. All right, so let's talk about the main problem or controversy that this show had, and that is the Satanic Panic. And we've talked about this before, and Dee, you didn't remember this. And I think, Willow, you were surprised when we talked about this when we were talking about the Smurfs.
I remember a little bit of the... I feel like I was introduced to like the whole issue with Dungeons and Dragons through like the talk show circuit.
Yeah, that is absolutely true. Because the 80s saw the rise of the Satanic Panic, and it was an American problem. It was a societal fear that worshipers of the occult were behind some of the country's major crimes, and that they weren't wrong. That was true in some cases, but this saw the majority of the blame put on media depictions of supposed deviant music shows and games, specifically Dungeons and Dragons. In the TV show Stranger Things, in season 4, the character of Eddie Munson is based on a real life character and or a real life person that came to media attention when Dungeons and Dragons came under major scrutiny from religious groups who feared it had power over young minds. And in 1979, there was a suicide of a 16-year-old boy, and he was an avid Dungeons and Dragons player. He played it with friends. He had a what they call a party, a group, and he was huge into Dungeons and Dragons. And I remember this. I remember hearing about this in the 70s. In 79, I was 9 years old, And I remember hearing the news report when I was out by my pool in the backyard. And because of that, the last season of the show, because of the rise of the Satanic Panic. So it starts in like 79 and it just escalates all the way through 85 and beyond. And, you know, literally religious groups were seeing demons and devils behind every bush. The Smurfs were satanic. Dungeons and Dragons was satanic. Anything that was, you know, even Star Wars was called satanic by some people. And so the last season of the show in 1985, the cartoon had to run a warning stating that Dungeons and Dragons had been linked to real life violent deaths before the airing of each episode.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't there an issue with a group using Dungeons and Dragons to kill people, or was that just like made up from?
Well,
like,
so that was a myth. That was an urban myth that was created out of this satanic panic, because some of those violent murders, I mean, the people did play Dungeons and Dragons. That is a fact. But to just automatically jump to the assumption that Dungeons and Dragons caused them to behave in that manner, that's a huge leap. Now, I am going to say this, that you know, it is true that media does influence us. That is absolutely the truth, because if it didn't, advertisers would not spend millions of dollars for a 30-second ad in the Super Bowl if media didn't influence our decisions and make us do things. But to automatically jump to the assumption that nobody or that everybody acts out, you know, the games that they're playing or the books that they're reading or the TV shows that they're watching is crazy. D, you look like you might have a thought on that.
I don't. I'm just listening to my kids. One of them's crying. One of them's asking me to make breakfast. The dog's going. It's just crazy around here. I mean, I kind of do have an opinion on that. I think no.
No what?
I don't think that you necessarily act out everything that you're watching.
But sometimes you do. You've seen Nathan play a really intense video game and then he's like uncontrollable for the next 4 hours.
Not true. The only thing he's ever done is got his little lightsabers and started and put his little Darth Vader mask on.
I love that. I love that.
I mean, that literally, like, oh my gosh.
Was it D&D that started everybody's fascination with dice?
Pretty much, yeah. And look, we've got a whole conversation happening in the chats between Zenton and Cade of Cartoon Commotion. Basically, and Zen.
All right, guys, it's getting crazy around here. I've got to go. I'm so sorry. Plus, I've got a photo shoot I got to get ready for.
Oh, okay.
I have to.
All right. Sorry.
Have a good night. Or,
right.
Have a great day. Have a good night.
Restart.
All right. We'll see you later.
Okay. Bye.
So Zentron corrected me. Presto is the magician. Eric is the cavalier. Hank the ranger, not the huntsman. Diana is the acrobat. Bobby barbarian, and Sheila the thief. Look, I only got 2 of them wrong. And I was just going out of memory. And Cartoon Commotion says the wizard looked like a pale Yoda. Yeah, that looks like Brian K. Morris playing Yoda. Just trust us. Google Brian K. Morris. And so Zentron, we need to connect because he's doing a project that's really cool. He's doing a 4K reproduction of the Dungeons and Dragons episode, The Dragon's Graveyard. And The Dragon's Graveyard is that episode that started the warning on the episode, I believe. What do we have that?
I find it funny how it seems like parents paid more attention to what the kids watched back in like the 70s and 80s, and then now it's like they don't even care what they throw their kid in.
That's right.
In front of.
Yeah, and the Dragon's Graveyard was the episode where they vowed to kill Venger, and Zentron's working on that. And there's a great, if you guys are like not watching live, but you're watching this on replay on YouTube, in the chat, there's a whole conversation going on between Cade and Zentron about this project that he's working on. And so incidentally, he says, Diana and Sheila in the fan art piece were redraws from my fan art, which I don't know which piece that is, Zentron. So, I did searched images for Dungeons and Dragons. Is it this one? Maybe.
You're gonna have to Zentron. You're gonna have to post your art on our page.
Yeah.
When it's done.
On Facebook or what?
And a link on how to purchase it.
And the kid that committed suicide was Michael Reeves, as Zentron mentions. He was the one that they based Eddie Munson off of in Stranger Things. Have you seen Stranger Things?
I have. And you know what? I think it's time to do another deep dive on that show, because there's stuff on that show that's like based on not just the Dungeons and Dragon things, but like the whole lore. Like there's lots of it that's based on reality, from government experiments to everything that the kids played with, essentially.
Yeah. I mean, look, Stranger Things is a love letter to 80s pop culture and 80s culture in general.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my childhood. I was those kids. And Facebook user says, love Stranger Things. And Dungeons and Dragons plays heavily into the Stranger Things show. Now, they're dealing mostly with the game, not the cartoon. But Zentron says of Michael Reeves, Dungeons and Dragons was the only thing that was keeping him alive, that was keeping him from committing suicide. That's interesting.
Yeah.
And why does Windows keep wanting to pop up a news window? Are they listening? So this is an interesting comment from Cade at Cartoon Commotion. Parental groups of the past weren't taking personal responsibility for their children. It was easier to put blame on the media than to be good parents. Of course, I'm not meaning every parent. Well, so here's the thing, Cade. Because I grew up in the 80s. I was there. Parental groups were more involved in the entertainment and media of the day than they are today. So anyway, that's a whole nother thing. So you know what, Willow, what else do we have here? Trivia. Eric was we talked about the Satanic Panic. Thievery isn't cool. Sheila, the thief, was controversial and drew complaints from parent groups because they thought a thief shouldn't be seen as cool or something to be looked up to. Because of this, she was only ever called a thief in the show's opening credits. Because remember, being a thief isn't funny. And then there was a finale, an episode that never aired, called Requiem. And the because of the Satanic Panic, the show had dwindling viewers and eventually had to come off the air. And because of this, the third season remained one episode short. It was the finale called Requiem. And Marvel Productions hired Michael Reeves to write the final episode, despite never airing. The script for Requiem eventually ended up being recorded as a radio play for the cartoon's DVD release and has been gone on to be used by fans to create their own fan-made final episode.
Yeah. So going back to that name, Michael Reeves was the writer on the show, not the kid that had passed away.
I see that correction. Thank you for that, Willow. All right. So
thanks, Zentron, by the way.
Yes, thank you, Zentron. And he said he just died the other week. That's interesting. Okay. So Javier Diaz, our friend JD, says, like Dungeons were for many people, Power Rangers was my only saving grace when the real world sucked. I grew up in the hood of the Bronx. I was bullied until I was a sophomore in high school. Yeah, I feel that. I feel that in a very
and
real way.
That's a story from a lot of us, unfortunately.
Yeah, I was bullied until I got a black belt in Taekwondo and then beat everyone up. And I got a reputation for being a badass. But that's another story. All right, so this is Jake Lindsay. I've not read this comment yet, so who knows what is about to be read on screen. So with Dungeons and Dragons, the magician character offended people because magicians were accused of black magic in those times. So parents thought the magician and D&D was doing black magic. Kind of, Jake. So even our kind of magic, sleight of hand magicians, were the victims of that Satanic Panic. I had a friend whose parents would not let him play with me anymore because I performed magic. And I obviously was a tool of Satan. He's a tool of Satan. Get behind me, you evil devil of the underworld. Be healed. I do that so well because I love it.
No, I'm just thinking that, I could have solved my issues in foster care so much quicker if I would have learned magic.
Well, that's what they tell you. Learn magic, be the life of the party, become popular.
Get shipped to another foster home.
Yeah. So, speaking about that final episode that never aired, in that final episode, Requiem, the identity of the villain Venger turned out that he was not trying to rob he was trying to rob the kids of their weapons for his own schemes. However, in Requiem, we learned that Venger had come under the influence of a corrupting force known as the Nameless One. Do you mean Satan? And that he was in fact the Dungeon Master's own human son all along. Man, first day with my new tongue. He was the Dungeon Master's son the whole time. The Dungeon Master was the little wizard that looks like a white Yoda. And let's see, what else? So a lot of people have asked, did the kids die in Dungeons and Dragons? And they tried to get home, but in the video game Baldur's Gate, and the Baldur's Gate games were a collection of games set in the realm of Dungeons and Dragons, first released in 1998. And in the Copper Coronet, a large tavern in Baldur's Gate 2, there is an Easter egg of two paintings on the wall that shows Bobby the Barbarian and Hank the Ranger as they appeared in the cartoon. And when you click on the painting, both paintings tell us that Bobby and Hank were eventually killed by the dragon Tiamat, who regularly appeared in the show. So perhaps The kids' decision to stay within the Dungeons and Dragons world ultimately led to their deaths. That's kind of
Wow.
depressing. Did you play Baldur's Gate, Willow? I know you're a big
Uh,
gamer.
I may have tried it out. Like I don't know if I actually played that game so much as just watched people play it. I know it was a fairly popular game in my circle of friends. I think I enjoyed the art more from it than I actually did like the game itself. But yeah, I'm fairly certain I drew a picture of one of the characters back in high school.
I love this comment from Grizzly. I love this comment from Grizzly Adams. Magic is the devil, Bobby. For those of you who don't get that reference, you're welcome. And Cade says, Johnny Fu. Everyone was kung fu fighting. No, I had a black belt in Taekwondo. Korean. Completely different from kung fu, which is Chinese. Kung fu, Taekwondo. Anyway, I've studied both, but anyway, I have a black belt in Taekwondo. Little bits of trivia about Johnny. So the Mysterious Illusion Show, Jake asked, if I'm correct, does Requiem mean raising the dead? I'm honestly not sure. No, it does not. A Requiem is the last rites, the final, it's like the wake, the funeral for the dead. And Mozart's Requiem is one of the best, most amazing pieces of music ever composed. If you've not listened to Mozart's Requiem, you really must. It's fantastic. Okay, this is interesting. Zentron, we need to connect because this is some phenomenal stuff here. I wasn't involved in the project, but members from the Facebook fan group I'm with did animate Requiem for YouTube, and the voiceover actress for Sheila agreed to come lend her voice again. All right, we need to see this. Zentron, can you send us the link to that? I want to see that because, look, I loved this show as a kid. I really did. And my favorite character was Bobby, the barbarian. I really related to him. And a lot of people today are calling for a revamp of the show because there's newfound demand and interest in this show because of the car commercial from 2019 or 2002. I forget what day that was or what year that was. But you know, even though it was canceled in 1985, it's got this immense popularity. And in 2019, Iron Studios released a limited edition series of 7 hand-painted figures from the cartoon 34 years after it came off the air. And I've got a picture of these right here. This, oh no, that's not it. It's down, deep below. Here it is. Iron Studio figurines. These are hand-painted figures of the entire cast. But earlier in 2020, like late part of 2020, Hasbro released a line of action figures. And these are all available at Walmart. As a matter of fact, Willow, last night I almost bought Diana and Bobby. Walmart in Gallatin, Tennessee, where I live, they have all 3 of the first wave, which is Diana, Hank, and Bobby. And they've got scads of them. They're just hanging on the shelf. They're peg warmers right now. And I went to see, maybe I'll pick some up, but they're $24 each. And I was like, I love this show, but I don't love it that much. So if you're into collectibles, there are a ton of toys out there. The original D&D game figures and the Silver Centurion there, he's super hard to find. He fetches a pretty big penny on the collector's
Wow.
market. The Warlord in the blue helmet, he's the most common one to find. You'll see him at a lot of aftermarket shops. But with the games, with the toys, with the cartoon series, Dungeons and Dragons is just a huge part of American pop culture. And so what did you think? Yeah. So Javier says, all right. So Javier says the figures are out now. It's a Walmart exclusive though. And yes, they are $24 each. You can buy
man after my own heart.
Yeah. And JD is right. They should be $9.99 at best. Jake, the action figures that I love to collect, and I'm going to show you one in a minute for new loot, are mega expensive. It's gotten out of control. But we're talking about D&D, the cartoon series. I got to show this off. So this just came out this month. This is the Dungeons and Dragons comic book series from IDW. It's the Saturday Morning Adventures Dungeons and Dragons. And you guys, this was an amazing book. It basically picks up where the last episode of the cartoon series left, with them still trying to find a way home, camping out. The dungeon master appears to them. And these Saturday Morning Adventure series from IDW have, for me, been a little bit hit or miss. The G.I. Joe was pretty good. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was pretty good. This is one of the best books I've read so far in 2023. This book is amazing. Amazing. And
Good to know.
yeah, so it's on store shelves right now.